Hello and welcome once again to The Old Man Speaks, where 3 times a week for 5 minutes I come on and talk about nothing in particular. So there was a fella named Ray, and he was around our neighborhood, got into all sorts of problems, but we didn't know who Ray was. And I've heard it said that a good way to find a worker is to see who the neighbors are using and then ask them. And if they tell you, oh, yeah, he's okay, then you've got a good worker. I don't recommend that. In the case of Ray, we saw Ray up on the roof of the neighbor's house. We just needed a small job done. One tile needed to be fixed. And we asked the neighbor, is he okay? They said, yeah, I guess so. And so Ray said, oh, yeah, I do roofs. And he came by, supposedly fixed the tile, and went on his merry way. Sometime later, our regular roofer, Mr. Peacock, goes up on the roof and he said, oh no, there are nails in the wrong places here. Who's been up here? This is awful. And he went on and on about incompetence and the moron who was up on our roof, and we kind of learned a lesson. Now, during this time, we started hearing all these other stories about Ray and how he had done terrible things to people's appliances and their property and their roofs and everything else. And eventually the law caught up with Ray. But in those days, I had to watch the kids for long periods of time, and these incidents would spark off stories. And we had a character called Joe, and Joe had a son. And one of the stories may have sounded something like this. Joe had a job during the winter time to test porta potties. He was to make sure that they were good to sit in and didn't have any technical issues. But in summertime, his son, who was just called Son with a capital S, he was out of school, and Joe needed to find some work that he could do with Son. Since Joe was high all the time, he figured he was a roofer. So he took out an ad in one of those coupon thingies that go all over the floor and end up in the trash. And it just so happened that Greta Gullible had gotten one of these mailers, and of course the coupons fell all over the floor, and as she was picking them up, she saw one that said, Joe&Son Roof Fixer Uppers, Nobody Does It Like Joe. And indeed, that was the truth. So Greta called Joe because she had a loose shingle on her roof that was causing a slight leak in her bathroom. Hello, is this Joe&Son? I have a leak in the roof, and I do believe that there is just one cracked tile for you to fix. When can you come over and give me an estimate? Well, Joe says, let me look at my calendar. Yes, how about if we come over right now? Wonderful, said Mrs. Greta Gullible. So Joe&Son loaded up the big red wheelbarrow with random stuff and took right off to 12 Gullible Lane, a street that was named after Greta's great-great-grandfather's dog, who was famous for a reason that no one cares to remember. But there is a big bronze statue of a dog on Gullible Lane with a plaque that says, Dog. 5 hours later, Joe&Son wheeled their way onto Gullible Lane, greeted by Mrs. Gullible herself, who said, Joe, you have suspenders to hold up your pants, but you have no shirt. So Joe reached inside the wheelbarrow and took out his work shirt, which he put on over his suspenders. I reckon I'll go up on the roof and have a look around, says Joe. Fortunately, there was a ladder in the back of the house that Joe could use. By the next morning, Joe had finished the job, and he took all his stuff and put it back in the wheelbarrow and went back home, But about a week later, another leak developed, and Miss Greta Gullible called a different person this time, and they came over, went on the roof, and screamed, "There's duct tape everywhere on this roof! What kind of an idiot?" He said, "Wait a minute. Did a guy named Joe do this?" And Mrs. Gullible said, "Why, yes, his name was Joe." He said, "Oh, Joe, nobody does it like Joe. It's going to take me a week to clean up this mess." The moral of this story is, even for the smallest job, you need to check your contractors, or you may end up with somebody like Ray or Joe or the guys who did our kitchen, but that's a story for another day. So until next time, take care, be well. See ya.